The great lecture hall of the Galactic Academy was the largest room Park had ever seen. It stretched across 3 levels, with seats carved into the walls like a giant bowl turned upside down. Hundreds of students sat in those seats, and not one of them looked like her. Was human. She was 23 years old, with black hair tied back in a simple ponytail and dark eyes that watched everything carefully. She sat in the back row, alone, because the alien students did not want to sit near her. They were not cruel about it. They simply did not know what to make of her. She was the first human to ever attend the academy in its 4,000-year history. The other students came from 17 different species. Some had scales. Some had tentacles. Some floated in the air on platforms because they could not survive in normal gravity. They all wore translation devices in their ears, small machines that turned every language into something they could understand. At the center of the room stood Professor Vell. He was which meant he was very tall with silver scales covering his body and 4 arms instead of 2. His eyes were large and yellow, and when he spoke, his voice filled the entire hall without him needing to shout. "Today we will discuss extinction," Professor Vell announced. He touched a control panel, and a holographic image appeared behind him, floating in the air like a ghost made of light. "We will study the most dangerous predator species the galaxy has ever known." Leaned forward in her seat. She had been at the academy for 3 months now, and she had learned many things about the galaxy. She had learned that there were thousands of intelligent species spread across millions of planets. She had learned that Earth was considered a small, unimportant world on the edge of known space. She had learned that most aliens thought humans were weak, fragile creatures who had somehow managed to develop space travel despite having soft skin and no natural weapons. She was curious to learn what species the galaxy considered truly dangerous. The holographic image changed to show a creature that made breath catch in her throat. It was massive, standing at least 4 meters tall, with 6 powerful legs and a body covered in natural armor that looked harder than steel. Its head was shaped like a hammer, with rows of teeth visible in its open mouth. Instead of hands, it had blade-like appendages that looked sharp enough to cut through metal. Though Professor Vell said and noticed that his voice had become quieter, more serious. For 300 cycles they were the terror of the Outer Rim. They did not negotiate. They did not trade. They simply took what they wanted and destroyed everything else. A student near the front raised a tentacle. It was a species that looked like a mix between an octopus and a jellyfish. "Professor, what made them so dangerous? There are many aggressive species in the galaxy." "An excellent question," Vell replied. "They were dangerous because they were perfectly designed for war. Their armor could stop most energy weapons. Their blades could cut through standard military shields. They bred quickly, so their armies were always growing. And most importantly, they had no fear. They did not retreat. They did not surrender. They fought until they won or died." Studied the image carefully. The creature was terrifying, yes, but she had seen terrifying things before. Earth had plenty of dangerous animals. What interested her was the way Professor Vell talked about He spoke about them in the past tense. "They consumed entire civilizations," Vell continued. 12 species were completely wiped out during their expansion. Another 30 were reduced to scattered survivors, hiding in the dark corners of the galaxy. For 3 centuries, it seemed like nothing could stop them. "What happened to them?" another student asked. This one was a small floating creature that looked like a ball of light with tiny wings. Professor Vell was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper, and the entire hall had to lean in to hear him. "They met something worse." The room went completely silent, could hear her own heartbeat. "They encountered a species so violent, so aggressive, and so impossible to defeat that within a single generation, their great empire began to crumble. Within 2 generations, there were scattered refugees, running from world to world, trying to escape an enemy that would not stop hunting them. Within 3 generations, they were gone entirely. extinct, erased from the galaxy. Vel let that sink in before continuing. This predator species, the ones who destroyed they are also gone now. They vanished from galactic records approximately 11,000 cycles ago. We do not know what happened to them. Perhaps they destroyed themselves. Perhaps they found new prey somewhere beyond our reach. All we know is that the galaxy is safer for their absence. His mind was racing. 11,000 cycles. She had learned enough about galactic time measurement to convert that roughly into Earth years. 11,000 cycles was approximately 40,000 years. 40,000 years ago, humans had been spreading across Earth, competing with other human species like Neanderthals. It could not be a coincidence. She raised her hand slowly. Professor Vel noticed her. She saw his yellow eyes focus on her, saw his mandibles click together in what she had learned was an expression of mild annoyance. Most professors at the academy tolerated her presence, but they did not expect her to contribute anything meaningful. Humans were considered primitive newcomers to the galactic community. Yes, Student Park. What was the species called, Professor? The ones who destroyed Vel waved one of his four hands dismissively. They had many names. The records are incomplete and fragmented. We know very little about them. Why do you ask? Stood up, she felt every eye in the lecture hall turned toward her. Hundreds of aliens all staring at the small human girl in the back row. Her heart was pounding so hard she thought it might burst out of her chest, but she had to know. She had to be sure. Because I think I know where they came from, sir. Vel's scales rippled, a sign of surprise. That is unlikely. As I said, the records are incomplete. Even our best historians have been unable to determine their origin. Started walking down the steps toward the center stage. Her footsteps echoed in the silent hall. She could feel the fear in the room, though she did not understand it yet. The other students were pulling away from her as she passed, pressing themselves against their seats as if they were afraid to touch her. It is called Earth, sir, said, and we are not extinct, we just went home. The lecture hall erupted into chaos. Had never seen so many aliens panic at once. A student fainted and fell from its floating platform. 3 wrapped their tentacles around themselves so tightly they looked like balls of rope. A group of students pressed against the far wall, their scales changing color from silver to a pale, sickly gray. Someone was screaming in a language that the translation device could not process. Professor Vel stood frozen at the podium. His 4 hands gripped the edges so hard that the metal was bending under his fingers. His yellow eyes were fixed on, and she could see something in them that she had never seen directed at her before. Fear, pure, absolute terror. That is not possible, he said. His voice was shaking. The species that destroyed went extinct thousands of cycles ago. The records are clear. Kept walking toward the center stage. She moved slowly, carefully, the way someone might move when trying not to startle a frightened animal. The records are wrong, Professor, or maybe they are incomplete. Either way, I am standing right here and I am very much alive. You cannot be one of them, a student shouted from somewhere in the crowd. Look at you, you are small, you are weak. You have no claws, no armor, no natural weapons. How could your species possibly defeat reached the center stage and turned to face the crowd. She looked at the hundreds of terrified faces staring down at her, and she felt a strange mix of emotions. Part of her wanted to laugh at how afraid they were of a single human girl. Part of her wanted to cry because she was starting to understand why they were so scared. May I use the display, Professor? She asked. Vel nodded slowly, not trusting himself to speak. Touched the controls and the image of the disappeared. In its place, she pulled up a diagram of a human skeleton. It floated in the air behind her, its empty eye sockets staring out at the audience. You are right that we look weak, said. We have no armor, our skin can be cut with a sharp rock. We are not very fast compared to most predators. We cannot fly. We cannot breathe underwater. On paper, we should not have survived at all. She pointed to the skeleton's skull. But look at our eyes. They face forward, not to the sides. Do you know what that means? It means we evolved as predators, not prey. Prey animals need eyes on the sides of their heads to watch for danger from all directions. Predators need eyes in front to focus on their target. The room was silent now. Even the panicking students had stopped to listen. Our ancestors were persistent hunters, continued. We could not outrun our prey, so we followed it. We walked after it for hours, sometimes for days, until it collapsed from exhaustion. Most animals can run faster than humans, but almost none of them can run longer. We simply refused to stop. She touched the controls again, and the image changed to show a human brain. This is our greatest weapon. Our brains are large compared to our bodies, and they give us something that most species lack. We can plan. We can remember. We can imagine things that do not exist yet and then build them with our hands. When we encountered a problem we could not solve with our bodies, we invented tools to solve it instead. Professor Vell finally found his voice. Tools are not unique to humans. Many species use tools. True, agreed. But how many species use tools to change their entire environment? We did not adapt to our world. We forced our world to adapt to us. When it was too cold, we made fire. When we needed to cross water, we built boats. When we wanted to fly, we created machines that carried us through the sky. Every obstacle we encountered, we overcame through pure stubborn refusal to accept defeat. A young student in the front row spoke up. His voice was trembling. But they were warriors, they had weapons, they had armies. How could primitive humans defeat them? Looked at him for a long moment. What is your name? He said quietly, let me ask you something. If someone captured you and your family, put you in chains and treated you like animals, what would you do? I would try to escape. And if escape was impossible, if you were surrounded by guards with weapons, trapped on a ship flying through space, with nowhere to run, was silent. You would wait, said. You would watch. You would learn everything about your captors, their language, their habits, their weaknesses. You would pretend to be broken while secretly planning. And when the right moment came, you would strike with everything you had because you knew it was your only chance. She turned to address the entire hall. That is what humans do. We survived on a planet where everything was trying to kill us. The gravity is strong enough to crush weaker species. The weather can change from burning heat to freezing cold in a matter of hours. The plants are poisonous. The animals have claws and fangs and venom. Even the tiny creatures you cannot see can get inside your body and destroy you from within. Pause to let that sink in. We did not become the dominant species on Earth because we were the strongest or the fastest. We became dominant because we never gave up. No matter how many times we failed, no matter how many of us died, we kept trying. We kept learning. We kept adapting. She looked directly at Professor Vell. You said my ancestors disappeared from galactic records 11,000 cycles ago. You assumed they went extinct, but I think something different happened. What? Vell asked, his voice barely a whisper. I think they won, said. I think they defeated the so completely that there was nothing left to fight. And then, instead of building an empire, they went home. They returned to Earth and chose to forget. They wanted to start over, to become something other than weapons and warriors. Why would they do that? Someone asked. Thought about her grandmother back on Earth. She thought about her brother, who spent his life helping people instead of hurting them. She thought about all the humans she had known who chose kindness even when the world gave them every reason to choose violence. Because surviving is not the same as living, she said softly. Because victory means nothing if you lose yourself in the process. Because maybe, just maybe, they were tired of being monsters. The lecture hall was completely silent. Could see tears running down the face of the young student named. She could see Professor Vell's hands shaking as he released his grip on the podium. I do not know if any of this is true, she admitted. I only know what I am. I am human. I come from Earth. And if you are right about my ancestors, then I am the descendant of the deadliest predators the galaxy has ever known." She smiled, and she noticed that several students flinched. "But I am also the descendant of people who chose to walk away from power, people who chose peace instead of war, people who decided that being kind was more important than being strong." She looked around the room one more time. "So the question is not what my ancestors were. The question is what we will choose to become now that we know the truth." The message arrived at small dormitory room the next morning. It was a simple text on her communication device, containing only an address and a time. At the bottom was a symbol she did not recognize, something ancient and complicated that her translator could not process. She knew she should be afraid. After her speech in the lecture hall, anything could happen. Some species might want to study her, others might want to kill her, but had never been good at being afraid, so she put on her jacket and went to the address. The building was old, older than anything else she had seen at the academy. Its walls were made of a black material that seemed to swallow light instead of reflecting it. There were no windows, no signs, nothing to indicate what was inside, just a single door that opened as she approached. Stepped through. The corridor inside twisted in ways that hurt her eyes. The walls bent at angles that should not have been possible. She walked for what felt like hours, descending deeper into the earth, until she reached a chamber lit by floating orbs of pale blue light. Waiting for her was the strangest being she had ever seen. It had no clear shape. One moment it looked like an old man wrapped in dark robes. The next moment it looked like a cloud of shadows with eyes. Its voice was like wind blowing through dead leaves, dry and ancient and somehow sad. "Park of Earth," it said. I am the High Archivist. I have kept the records of this galaxy for longer than your species has existed." Bowed her head respectfully. She had learned that showing respect was important when dealing with beings older than you. "Thank you for meeting with me." "You have caused quite a disturbance," said. There was no anger in his voice, just a tired kind of amusement. "Professor Vell has submitted 17 official complaints. The Academy Council is holding emergency meetings. 3 ambassadors have requested to be transferred to different stations." "I only told the truth." "Yes, truth often causes more trouble than lies." Gestured with something that might have been a hand, and a doorway opened in the darkness. "Come, there is something you must see." They walked together through more twisted corridors, lost all sense of direction. She could not tell if they were going up or down, left or right. Time itself seemed to stretch and bend in this place. Finally, they reached a vast chamber filled with objects displayed on floating platforms. There were weapons made of metal and bone. There were pieces of armor that looked scratched and burned. There were tools whose purpose could not guess. And covering every surface were symbols, writing in languages that had been dead for thousands of years. "This is the Forbidden Archive," explained. "The Council does not like to admit it exists. Here we keep the artifacts that are too dangerous or too disturbing to display publicly." He led her to a specific platform near the center of the room. On it rested a simple blade made of iron, its handle wrapped in worn leather. Next to it was a flat stone with something carved into its surface. Looked at the stone, and her blood went cold. It was a handprint, 5 fingers spread wide, pressed into the rock with enough force to leave a permanent mark. It was unmistakably human. "We found these on a colony world," said quietly. "One of the last worlds they held before their complete collapse. When our researchers arrived, they found the entire colony destroyed, every building burned, every killed. There were no survivors." Reached out and touched the glass case protecting the artifacts. Her hand aligned perfectly with the carved handprint. "Among the ruins we found messages," continued, "written in a language we eventually translated. Would you like to know what they said?" Nodded, not trusting herself to speak. They said, "We came here in chains. We leave as conquerors, remember us." Closed her eyes, she could almost see it. Humans, her ancestors, stolen from Earth and brought to this place, treated like animals, used as food or slaves or worse, and then somehow rising up, fighting back, winning. "They made a terrible mistake," said. "They saw your species as prey, weak, soft creatures that could be easily controlled. They took thousands of humans from Earth and transported them to their colonies." How asked. "We had no space technology back then. They did not need human cooperation. They simply landed their ships, captured as many humans as they could carry, and left. Your ancestors woke up in cages, flying through space, surrounded by monsters they could not understand." Opened her eyes and looked at the ancient blade, but they learned. They learned everything, confirmed. Within 3 generations of captivity, your ancestors had mastered the language. They had mapped the social structure of their captors. They had identified every weakness in biology and society. They pretended to be broken slaves while secretly building a network of resistance across 47 colony worlds. And when they were ready, they attacked everywhere at once. They had no warning. One day their slaves were obedient, the next day they were dying. Your ancestors used stolen weapons at first, then weapons they built themselves. They turned this own technology against them. Moved to another display. This one showed a holographic recording, grainy and distorted with age. Watched as human figures moved through a burning city, fighting creatures twice their size with nothing but determination and rage. They could not understand what was happening, said. They had conquered dozens of species before. None had ever resisted like this. None had ever fought with such ferocity. Your ancestors did not simply want freedom. They wanted revenge. They wanted them to suffer the way they had suffered. Did they suffer, I mean? Very much. His voice carried no judgment, only ancient sorrow. Your ancestors hunted the way they had once hunted them. They did not stop when the war was won. They did not stop when they begged for peace. They only stopped when there were no more left to kill. Felt sick. She had always known that humans were capable of terrible things. History was full of examples, but hearing about it from the perspective of the galaxy, seeing evidence that her ancestors had committed genocide on an interstellar scale, was different. What happened after, she asked. That is the mystery, replied. When the war ended, your ancestors had the largest fleet in the galaxy. They had captured enough technology to build an empire that would have lasted for. They could have ruled everything. But they didn't. No, they gathered their ships, collected every human they could find, and returned to Earth. They destroyed all evidence of their contact with the galaxy. They dismantled their fleet. They buried their weapons. And then, it seems, they simply forgot. Stared at the holographic recording. The fighting had stopped now. Human figures stood among the ruins, their faces hidden by smoke and shadow. They looked tired. Not victorious, just tired. Why are you showing me this? She asked. Was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was softer than before. Because you need to understand what you are. The galaxy feared your ancestors more than they feared they were predictable. They wanted territory and resources. Your ancestors were something else entirely. They were chaos. They were revenge given physical form. They were proof that even the weakest species could become the most dangerous if pushed far enough. He turned to face her directly, his shape shifting and changing in the dim light. The question now is simple. You have learned the truth about your past. What will you do with that knowledge? Looked at the handprint carved into ancient stone. She thought about her grandmother Suk, who had survived terrible things and still chose to grow flowers. She thought about her brother, who built houses for strangers instead of tearing them down. I will do what my ancestors should have done, she said quietly. I will remember, but I will not repeat. I will carry this truth, but I will not let it define me. Made a sound that might have been approval. Then perhaps there is hope for your species after all. The news spread faster than light itself. Within a week of lecture, every major civilization in the galaxy knew the truth. The species that had destroyed the was not extinct. They had simply been hiding on a small blue planet at the edge of known space, waiting. Some civilizations reacted with terror. They pulled their ambassadors from Earth's sector and began building defensive fleets. Others reacted with fascination, sending requests for more information about these mysterious humans. A few reacted with anger, demanding that Earth be destroyed before the humans could threaten galactic peace again. But most civilization simply waited to see what would happen next. The Galactic Council summoned to appear before them. The council chamber was located at the very heart of the Academy station, in a room that floated in perfect darkness. 12 platforms hung in the void, each holding a representative from one of the most powerful civilizations in known space. They formed a semicircle around a single spotlight where was expected to stand. She arrived wearing her Academy uniform, a simple gray suit that made her look even smaller and younger than she was. As she walked to the spotlight, she could feel 12 pairs of eyes watching her every movement. Chancellor spoke first. She was an elder, her tentacles faded to pale gray with age, her voice carrying the weight of centuries of wisdom. Park of Earth, you stand before the Galactic Council as a representative of your species. Do you understand the significance of this moment? I do, Chancellor replied. Her voice was steady, but her hands were shaking inside her pockets. The evidence has been examined, Chancellor continued. Your genetic structure has been compared to samples preserved in the archive. There is no doubt that you are a direct descendant of the species that waged war against the Empire. Murmurs rippled through the council. Could not see the other representatives clearly in the darkness, but she could hear their voices, speaking in languages her translator struggled to process. The question before this council, the Chancellor said, is what to do about humanity's return to the galactic stage. Some have argued for immediate containment. Others have called for diplomatic engagement. Before we decide, we wish to hear from you directly. A different voice spoke from the darkness. It belonged to Bay, one of the few aliens who had supported human inclusion in the Academy. Park, do you deny that your ancestors committed genocide against the? No, said, I do not deny it, the evidence is clear. My ancestors did terrible things. Then how can we trust your species? How do we know you will not do the same to us? Took a deep breath. She had thought about this question for days, knowing it would be asked. She had prepared speeches, arguments, defenses, but standing here in the spotlight, facing the judgment of civilizations that had existed before Earth had formed, all her prepared words seemed hollow. So she spoke from her heart instead. You cannot trust us, she said. Not completely, not yet. Trust is something that must be earned over time, and we have not had that time with you. The council was silent, surprised by her honesty. I will not stand here and tell you that humans are peaceful, continued. We are not. Even on our own planet we have wars. We hurt each other. We make terrible choices. The capacity for violence that my ancestors showed against thee is still inside us. It has always been inside us. Then why should we not destroy you now? A harsh voice demanded. It came from a did not recognize, speaking from a platform shrouded in shadow. Why should we not end the threat before it begins again? Because violence is not all we are, said. Yes, my ancestors destroyed but what did they do after? They did not build an empire. They did not conquer the galaxy. They went home. They raised children. They planted crops. They wrote poetry and painted pictures and fell in love. She stepped forward, out of the spotlight and into the darkness, moving closer to the council platforms. Several representatives flinched. You want to know what makes humans dangerous? It is not our strength or our weapons. It is our ability to choose. We can choose to be monsters, yes, but we can also choose to be something else. Every single day, billions of humans on Earth wake up and choose kindness instead of cruelty. They choose to help strangers instead of hurt them. They choose to build instead of destroy. Jin spoke next. She was another human ally, her voice calm and measured. The Council needs assurances. If we allow humanity to rejoin galactic civilization, what guarantees can you offer? I can only guarantee one thing, replied. I can guarantee that we will try. We will make mistakes. We will sometimes fail, but we will try to be better than our ancestors were. We will try to build something good. That is not enough, the Shadowed said. Words are meaningless, we need proof. Then let me give you proof. Turn to face the entire council. My species did not know about any of this. We did not know that we had been taken from Earth. We did not know about the war. We thought we were alone in the universe until 50 years ago when we detected your communications for the first time. She let that sink in. For 40,000 years, humans lived on Earth without any memory of what our ancestors did. And in that time, do you know what happened? We developed art and music and science. We learned to heal diseases and grow food and fly through the sky. We built cities and libraries and schools. We created beauty out of nothing, simply because we wanted to. Chancellor leaned forward on her platform. You are saying that when humans forgot they were warriors, they became creators instead. I am saying that we were always both, replied. The same hands that can hold a weapon can also hold a paintbrush. The same minds that can plan a war can also write a symphony. We did not stop being dangerous when we returned to Earth. We simply chose to use our abilities differently. There was a long silence. Could hear nothing but her own breathing and the soft hum of the platforms floating in the void. Finally, Chancellor spoke again. Park, you have given us much to consider. The Council will deliberate and reach a decision. But before you go, I wish to ask you one final question. Of course, Chancellor. If the Council decides to reject humanity, to deny your species a place in galactic civilization, what will you do? Thought about her family back on Earth. Her grandmother, Suk, who always said that the best revenge was living well. Her brother, who believed that every person deserved a chance. Her parents, who had encouraged her to reach for the stars even when everyone said it was impossible. We will be disappointed, she said honestly. But we will not seek revenge. We will not build fleets to destroy you. We will simply go home, like our ancestors did, and continue living our lives. We will raise our children and tend our gardens and look up at the stars, knowing that there are others out there even if we cannot join them. She paused. Because that is what humans do, Chancellor. We keep going. No matter what happens, no matter how many times we fall, we get back up. Not because we want to prove anything, but because hope is part of who we are. We cannot stop hopping any more than we can stop breathing. Chancellor was silent for a long moment. Then slowly she nodded. Thank you, Park of Earth. The Council will make its decision known. You are dismissed. Bowed her head respectfully and walked out of the darkness, back into the light. She did not know what the Council would decide. She did not know if humanity would be welcomed or rejected. But she had spoken the truth, and that was all she could do. The rest was up to them. 6 months had passed since stood before the Galactic Council. The decision had not come quickly. For weeks, the Council had debated and argued, with some members demanding humanity be isolated forever and others calling for full integration. Messages had flown back and forth between the Academy Station and Earth, carrying questions and answers, fears and hopes. In the end, humanity was granted provisional membership in the galactic community. Not full acceptance, not yet, but a chance, a beginning. Now stood on the observation deck of the Starward Hope, Earth's first official diplomatic vessel. Through the massive windows, she could see the Galactic Council station growing larger as they approached. It was beautiful, a structure of light and crystal that floated in the darkness of space like a jewel on black velvet. Behind her, a delegation of 12 humans prepared for the most important meeting in their species' history. Ambassador Lee was reviewing her notes for the 100th time, her gray hair pulled back in a tight bun, and her face calm with the patience of 30 years in diplomacy. Dr. Dong, Earth's leading expert on alien cultures, was packing back and forth, clutching a filled with questions he might never have time to ask. There were scientists and artists, teachers and doctors, each chosen to represent a different aspect of human civilization. They were nervous, all of them, but they were also ready. Captain One joined at the window. He was tall and steady, with kind eyes and hands that had guided ships through storms. He had volunteered for this mission knowing it might be dangerous, knowing that some species still wanted humans eliminated. "How are you feeling?" he asked. "Terrified," admitted, "but also excited. Is that strange?" "Not at all. I feel the same way." He smiled slightly. "My grandmother used to say that courage is not about being fearless. It is about being afraid and doing the thing anyway." Nodded, she thought about her own grandmother, Suk, who had sent her a message before she left Earth. The message had said simply, "Be yourself. That has always been enough." "Do you think they will accept us?" Captain asked. "Really accept us, I mean, not just tolerate us." Watched the station grow closer. Somewhere inside that structure, representatives from hundreds of species were waiting. Some of them remembered stories about the terrible warriors who had destroyed the. Some of them were afraid of what humans might do. Some of them were curious about these strange, soft creatures from the edge of the galaxy. "I do not know," she said honestly. "But I know that we have to try. We have to show them who we really are, not just who our ancestors were." "And who are we really?" Thought about that question. She thought about all the humans she had known in her life, the good ones and the bad ones, the brave ones and the frightened ones, the ones who built and the ones who destroyed. "We are complicated," she finally said. "We are capable of terrible things but also wonderful things. We can hate with all our hearts, but we can love just as strongly. We make mistakes constantly, but we also learn from them. We are not perfect, and we probably never will be." She turned to face Captain. "But we never stop trying to be better. That is what makes us human, not our DNA or our history or our potential for violence. It is our refusal to give up, even when everything seems hopeless." The ship's communication system chimed. A voice announced that they were approaching the docking bay. Ambassador gathered the delegation together for final preparations. Took one last look at the station. In a few minutes, she would step through those doors and face a galaxy that feared her species. She would have to prove that humans deserved a second chance, that the monsters who destroyed the were not the whole story. It seemed like an impossible task. But then again, humans had been doing impossible things since they first walked out of their caves and looked up at the stars. The ship docked with a gentle bump. The airlock doors hissed open, revealing a long corridor filled with light. At the end of the corridor, could see a crowd waiting. Aliens of every shape and size, watching the human delegation with expressions that ranged from curiosity to fear to hope. Ambassador stepped forward first, her head held high. The rest of the delegation followed, walking in a neat line toward their future. Was last. She paused at the threshold, looking back at the ship that had carried them here. For a moment, she felt the weight of 40,000 years pressing down on her shoulders, the weight of her ancestors' choices, both the terrible and the wonderful. Then she let it go. The past could not be changed. The war against the had happened. Her ancestors had done what they did, for reasons she would never fully understand. All she could do now was move forward and try to build something new. She thought about her brother, who spent his days building schools in places where children had no place to learn. She thought about her grandmother, Suk, who planted flowers in damaged earth until beauty grew from destruction. She thought about all the humans throughout history who had chosen to create instead of destroy, to heal instead of hurt, to love instead of hate. Those people were her ancestors too. They were just as much a part of human history as the warriors who had conquered the stars. Step through the airlock and into the light. The crowd parted as she walked forward, joining the rest of the delegation. She could feel eyes on her from every direction, studying her, measuring her, trying to decide if she was a threat or a friend. She was neither, she realized. She was simply human, nothing more, nothing less. Chancellor was waiting at the end of the corridor. The old looked tired but hopeful, her pale tentacles curled in a gesture of welcome. "Park of Earth," she said, "you have returned." "Yes," Chancellor replied, "we have returned, and this time we intend to stay." "The galaxy is watching," Chancellor said quietly, so only could hear. "Many are still afraid. They remember stories of what your species once did. It will take time to change their minds." "We have time," said. "We have been waiting 40,000 years for this moment. We can wait a little longer for acceptance." Chancellor made a sound that might have been a laugh. "You are an interesting species, Park. I do not fully understand you, but I find myself hoping that you will succeed." "Thank you, Chancellor. That means more than you know." The formal ceremony began. Ambassador gave a speech about peace and cooperation. Doctor presented gifts from Earth, samples of art and music and literature that showed the best of human culture. The other delegates smiled and nodded and tried their best to look friendly instead of frightening. Throughout it all, stood quietly and watched. She watched the aliens in the crowd slowly relax as they realized that the humans were not going to attack them. She watched fear turn to curiosity, and curiosity turn to something that might someday become trust. It would not happen overnight. It might not happen in her lifetime, but it would happen eventually because humans never gave up. They were the species that had crawled out of caves and reached for the sky. The species that had been enslaved and fought their way to freedom. The species that had destroyed an empire and then chosen to forget because they wanted to be more than warriors. They were humans, and they were finally home. As the ceremony ended and the delegations began to mingle, slipped away to a quiet corner of the observation deck. She looked out at the stars, countless points of light scattered across the infinite darkness. Somewhere out there was Earth, a small blue dot spinning around an ordinary star. Her home, her species' home, the place where humans had learned to be human. She whispered a promise to the stars, to her ancestors, to all the generations that would come after her. "We will make you proud," she said. "We will be kind and curious and brave. We will build bridges instead of walls. We will reach out our hands in friendship instead of raising them in violence. We will be what you always hoped we could become." The stars did not answer. They simply shone, distant and eternal, watching over a galaxy that had just become a little less afraid. Smiled and went to join her people. There was work to be done.